Over the last few days, the Jeff Stoutland departure has been painted as mutual, but unfortunately, that is not the full story. Apparently, the Eagles wanted him to stay. This wasn't a clean breakup. It was a messy divorce, and that matters. Stoutland didn't even plan on putting out a statement when he did. He released it early to make one thing crystal clear. He and the Eagles are not on the same page. So, what exactly changed? Let's dive into that now. On a new episode of Flipping the Birds.
You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds. And it's been a very wild offseason, and the free agency nor the draft has even started. There's been nothing but unfortunate drama from Vic Fangio threatening to retire to now the Jeff Stoutland departure. Brian Cameron, Corey Neidl, and David Neese here on the story to break down pretty much everything we've witnessed and heard behind the scenes. So, guys, Stout is out, which means after David downgraded him from Stoutland University to Stoutland Community College, David took over the entire educational system and just got rid of it. So what can you tell us about this current situation with Jeff Stoutland, David?
He's not the offensive line coach anymore. I think that's the biggest takeaway. I liked your intro, the way you kind of described that it wasn't exactly a mutual departure there. I think they wanted him to change the way he did things. I think there were players in the locker room that wanted him to change the way he did some things. And Jeff Stoutland, because I've been hearing it all day long, people say he's the best OL coach in the league. He could easily, learn somebody else's system and coach it just as effectively. Well, one, he's 64 years old and he is a teacher and not a student at this stage in life. And I don't think he really wants to, go through that. He believes in the system that he does. He believes in its effectiveness. They're coming off a season where one of the running backs had one of the most special seasons in the history of the NFL. So you're not going to convince him that some 33-year-old guy's system is better than his after he's been in the NFL all these years. He's been doing this longer than those guys have been alive. So I think that's a little bit of a slap in the face to some degree. And he just wasn't going to, bend there. And to a lot of degrees, I don't blame him, but also the Eagles have to move forward as well. And if their offense needs change and it had become too predictable, which it had, I think that they did need to make a move. I think, to just put this out there first, I think Stoutland's one of the best coaches that's ever been in Philadelphia. He has one of the greatest impactful tenures of any coach in my lifetime on that team. I think he's fantastic, everything he does. That being said, that doesn't mean there didn't need to be a change if he was unwilling to change, the way he structures things. And from what I am reading now and being reported by a lot of the other beat writers is that he was basically stripped a lot of this during the bye week, during that mini bye. So this happened a long time ago. So this has been festering. He's been angry. I mean, Schefter teased it, 10 days ago or whatever. This wasn't something that just came out because of all these hires. It had already been brewing. And the Eagles needed to make a change. They needed some unpredictability in play calling. I mean, the Eagles used play action under center 2.8 times per game last season. LaFleur and the team that almost all of these other guys are coming from in Green Bay did it 6.1 times per game. That's a huge difference. And that alone is going to add significant unpredictability. And when everything was being run out of shotgun, everybody who watches these games, Corey, Brian, all of us, we knew every time they were running. And so did the defense. And it's always worked all of these years because they had the best athletes and they were expected to win man-on-man battles. And when you have players with injuries and you have a few downgrades on the line, that doesn't work anymore. And nothing ever changed. There was no pivots. And long story short, the offense staled. And this is the result of what happens when you need to make changes and people are unwilling to do that.
How do you feel about the situation, Corey?
Yeah, I mean, David said a lot there that I agree with. I think my biggest issue with this is how it seemingly took place, where a coach of Jeff Stoutland's stature felt diminished in a franchise that he has been one of the pillars in for the last 13 years. I mean, if you read that Tim McManus report on ESPN, Stoutland's agent came out and said that he felt like his voice wasn't being heard in the coaching staff meetings and wasn't being heard in the building. To me, like, that's a red flag. If there's somebody on that offensive staff that I think you can rely on to trust to fix whatever the problem might be, Jeff Stoutland's got to be among the top of that list, if not on the top of that list. So I think my biggest gripe is just the way that it was handled. I mean, according to the report, Nick Sirianni and Kevin Patullo tried to revamp the running game, and Stoutland thought that he wasn't being in the loop enough and adequately enough to warrant him being the running game coordinator anymore. Now, you could take that two ways. You could take that as this is a veteran, longtime coach who obviously knows what he's talking about, and his feelings should be certainly accounted for. Or you can take a look at him and be like, oh, well, it sounds like Stoutland's kind of being a baby about it, and he wasn't included in the changes. I don't really think it's that. I do think that Stoutland felt that if he wasn't going to be part of the running game anymore, then why would he be the running game coordinator? So I think a lot of people have an issue, too, with the fact that it's Jeff Stoutland that kind of got his duties relegated or changed. Meanwhile, Kevin Patullo kind of had full reins the whole season. Now, I know Nick Sirianni said, near the end of that regular season, he was starting to dip his hands in. That's what we were told. Maybe it happened sooner behind closed doors. But I just think that this is an ugly ending to what is arguably one of the most beloved positional coaches in all of football. I mean, it's very hard to earn the adornment and be acknowledged the way Jeff Stoutland has been by this Eagles fan base of any position coach. I mean, he's viewed as popular as the head coach, the OC, the DC. I mean, people are taking pictures of Stoutland when he's working with the offensive line during the pregame. You tweet out a picture of Stoutland and it gets views, it gets engagement because people understand what he's meant to this franchise. So I just think that it was a poor way to go about it. It almost looks as if Stoutland is kind of the scapegoat as to why this offense faltered. I know Brian had mentioned, I know that David had mentioned throughout the season that he should deserve some heat because of the way the offensive line was playing. We also agree that the offensive line was banged up all season long. But was it Stoutland's fault that Jalen Hurts didn't want to run that much, didn't want to throw the ball over the middle? Is it Stoutland's fault that A.J. Brown was unhappy all season and just didn't really put in a great effort in the playoffs? I mean, there's a lot of different factors that went into why this offense struggled, and you're kind of pitting this on a guy who oversaw one of the most historic seasons when it comes to running the football that we've seen in quite some time. So it doesn't really add up to me. And lastly, I do think what was pretty eyebrow raising to me was in Stoutland's statement, he didn't thank anybody other than the fans. He didn't thank Jeffrey Lurie. He didn't thank Howie Roseman. He didn't thank Nick Sirianni. Now, maybe there's going to be another statement he says, and maybe this was more directed just towards the fans of the city, but it certainly caught my attention that there was no quick thank you of anybody in that front office.
I didn't catch that. That's actually a really good grab. And it's one of those things, and I hate to beat a dead horse, and I know every time I mention this, David, I think it's like David chuckles a lot, just because it feel like all this leads to one road, in my opinion, right? At some point, we all have to acknowledge the fact that there's something wrong with the hierarchy in this coaching staff. And I mean the hierarchy, I mean, there's something wrong with Nick Sirianni and his approach to his players and his coaching staff when you have from what we've been told, such a huge split within the organization. And I feel like that split leads all the way to the top between Jeffrey and Howie, where this is Howie's guy, and this isn't really Jeffrey's number one pick. And we, when he was hired, we felt like he was a last resort. It worked out. Yes, we got a Super Bowl, but outside of the Super Bowl, we've got a lot of immaturity on the sidelines. We have a lot of mixed reactions from players. We have him going after players on the sidelines and getting in their faces. Like, this is, have you guys seen The Little Giants? Remember that movie from back in the day? Mm-hmm. Like, that's how he looks on the sidelines, like the opposing coach. So it's been a very weird atmosphere. I feel like now in this offseason, because everything that's happening from Vic Fangio, Christian Parker moving on, and we all felt like Christian Parker was going to succeed Fangio at one point, and if Fangio was going to retire this season, why was Christian Parker not already getting acclimated into that defensive coordinator role if that's where he was meant to be? Like, there's a lot of friction behind the scenes, and I feel like it's starting to come to light. It's sad to see a guy of his stature leave the organization the way he's leaving, but I didn't catch the fact that he didn't thank him, right? And I think that's a huge grab.
If I can touch on one thing y'all both mentioned, and that was the hierarchy. If you're Nick Sirianni and you're wanting to do an offense a certain way, and your offensive line coach is unwilling to do that, there's going to be a problem, and there's going to be a big problem. And Stoutland, as much as he is beloved by fans and everything that Corey mentioned, name 3 other offensive line coaches in the NFL. You're not going to, because nobody knows them, because they come and go every 2-3 years. Maybe this was a bigger power play than you think. And Nick Sirianni, if he's going to go down, he's going to go down doing what he wants to do, not what he's been dictated to have to do for the past few years. And you mentioned also Jalen Hurts and an unwillingness to run. Some of that is because of being under center and not under center. And, Stoutland, for as great as he is, and again, I think he's one of the best. I just want that out there before I say anything negative. But if you look at the years that he's been the offensive line coach in the running game, before Jalen Hurts, outside of one season in 2017, when they invested heavily in running back with LeGarrette Blount and they traded for Jay Ajayi, they ranked like 3rd in the league in rushing. All the other years, they were in the teens. And then you got Jalen Hurts, and suddenly they're the number 1 rushing team, 5th, 8th. But if you take Jalen Hurts' rushing yards out of that equation, they're like 20th averaged in the league. The running backs really haven't been doing it. Now, Saquon Barkley did, but if you go back and look at all the other leading rushers over the past decade, almost none of them had 1,000 yards, and when they did, it was barely. And that's just the reality of it. And if you're Nick Sirianni and you're coming off of the season the way he did, and you're giving your excuses to save your job, well, that's a big one, because they have dictated that to him and to every coach that's been in that building since 2013. So Corey used the word, I think, scapegoat, but if I'm the head coach, I'm going to take that scapegoat too, because it was pushed on me. It wasn't something I wanted. I wanted my own ideas. I wanted fresh concepts. I don't want to just run everything out of shotgun. I want play action. I want under center. I want a whole bunch of different things. And I think this is a culmination of all of that, because he was really close, which has come out now, to losing his job after 23. Well, he's really close again. And if you're going to go down, you might as well go down doing what you want to do and having the people in the building that you want. And they finally gave autonomy to the OC. And that's why you're seeing all these coaching changes.
I have a question, and for both of you. With obviously, we discussed the Jeff Stoutland stuff, and there's a pro and con to it at the end of the day, right? We also a very stale running game that didn't include Jalen Hurts moving the ball on his own that much.
And what happens when he don't run?
Yeah,
it failed. The running game failed.
If the Eagles crash and burn this season, they have 2 promising guys on the offense. If you're Jeffrey Lurie, do you look at it as like, hey, this is a Sirianni issue, or do I clean house entirely? Because they're cleaning house they're cleaning house entirely right now. They're looking for a new QB coach, and none of us even knew that Loeffler was on his way out. They just hired a new run game coordinator to replace Stoutland. Kevin Patullo is somewhere in limbo in all of this, and nobody knows what his role is with the organization, or if he's on the way out. But if they crash and burn the season, do you move one of these? Do you move Sean Mannion as head coach, or even Josh Grizz as head coach, or do you just clean house entirely? Because they're investing a lot
in cleaning house right now. And the only person that's going to be the remaining factor outside probably Aaron Moorhead at this point, unless they replace him, is going to be Sirianni.
I mean, I think you just got to see how Mannion handles next season. I don't know if you just give the ropes to a 33, 34-year-old first-year play caller just because he's the OC. I do think you need to see what he does, how this offense looks. Could that be a possible move? Absolutely. But I do think that Nick Sirianni's on thin ice again. I do agree with what David said, where if he's going to go down swinging, he's going to want to get the guys that will potentially help him keep his job. And if Sean Mannion's like, I want this guy, or I want this guy, or this is how I want to do things, then Nick Sirianni has to make that decision. And I don't have a problem that Stoutland's no longer with the team. I just think the way it has been reported of how it happens or how it happened just really is a terrible look from within the NovaCare Center. It seems like something stinks, for lack of a better term. Like there's something going on where, where they say there's smoke, there's fire. It just seems like that is more prevalent with all these changes. So I do think maybe they elevate somebody, but I think we have to see how this offense looks. It's evident they want to revamp this entire offensive scheme. And you heard it from players. We mentioned it in the last episode. Devontae Smith said, we've been running the same stuff for the last 4 years. Saquon Barkley for the last 2 years. He said nothing's changed. So clearly the defenses in the league have caught up and have figured out this offense that the Eagles are running. And as David mentioned, we all knew when they were running the football. We all knew when that third down and waving the white flag draw play was coming. They were too predictable. So I do think that it could be a possibility. The jury remains, to be seen here with these two guys, and the jury's still out with Mannion and Grizzard. And to put a finishing touch on my point here, you mentioned Kevin Patullo and what he's going to do. Any of you two find it a bit odd that he doesn't have any other interviews right now for any other coaching positions in the NFL? I mean, he was supposed to be this really great offensive-minded coach. And listen, I'm not taking away for what he did as a QB coach and what he did in the past with the Eagles, but clearly not many people in the league think that highly of KP right now based on what they saw, because if he was that highly regarded, you think somebody would at least pry and interview him, bring him into the building and kind of say, hey, like, what went wrong? What happened? What do you think you can do and bring to our team? And so far that hasn't happened.
Yeah, I don't even know what the rules are to interview him. Like, what's the promotion now? He's not OC. So,
Right.
like, I don't even know what his role is. I don't know that anybody else does either. Yeah, that's a very interesting topic that they're not going to address until they have to. But as far as Brian's question about, the coaching staff and a look to the future with that, I think you've seen a massive injection of youth, which is something this team hasn't done in a long time with their, coaching staff. 75% of the new coaches couldn't even run for president. They're not even 35 years old. I mean, it's pretty wild. I mean, we've seen nothing like this in decade. I mean, very long time since they've had this type of injection of youth. So I do think it's a look to the future. Like Corey said, it'll be dependent upon the success. If they're not that successful, but the reason was something due to Sirianni more so than, the offensive coordinator, then yeah, I do think it's a situation that they've kind of put themselves in so they could elevate one of the players. I mean, one of the staff members, because they brought so much youth in here, so many new ideas, and they're just kicking the tires to see what works. And I do think that they would have a lot of in-house, if nothing else, interviews, because they have a lot of good minds in this building now. And not to mention, everybody kind of disliked their long hiring process of doing this. They spoke to almost every potential candidate in the league this season, which most of them had no chance of getting the job this year, but I think they were looking forward to down the road. They were trying to see who the potential candidates are that could fill that position next year if, things don't work out the way they did. And just to end my part of this conversation about it, it's crazy that this is not even the Super Bowl yet. The Super Bowl hasn't even been played. We've done all this stuff. And every year after they won or participated in the Super Bowl, all the fans were like, how did we end up with these crappy OCs and DCs on our team? This is why. Because look at everything the Eagles have done this month after they were bumped from the playoffs that you have no participation in if you play in that Super Bowl. All these candidates are gone. All these interviews don't happen. They have gotten a wealth of information from this. And it's just insane just how long the process is if you're actually allowed to go through it, because we just never got to see that because of how deep the Eagles went into the playoffs all these years.
Before we wrap up, I do want to pick your brains the both of you, just because obviously I was not in the locker room this season because of moving down south, which Corey loves every time I say that. What's the feedback, if any feedback, that you guys received in the locker room in reference to the friction amongst the coaching staff with Jeff Stoutland and the run game and the offense being still? Obviously, we know Devontae Smith voiced his opinions, saying pretty much it's been the same offense since he was drafted. AJ Brown has voiced his opinions, and now people are turning that to trade rumors, but that's for another time. What have you guys witnessed in the locker room or even around the locker room that kind of you saw this kind of coming to an end at some point?
I mean, there wasn't really anything in particular when I was at the games other than like what we've heard and what we tweeted out for, Philly Sports Network and on our X accounts. There was just frustration from across the offensive board. You talk to the linemen, you talk to the running backs, the wide receivers, tight ends. I mean, it was the same theme over and over again, that they know they're better than how they're playing, but it just never improved. And eventually that just got old. And I think that got very frustrating, and the fans didn't want to hear it anymore. I also think the biggest thing that I took away from it, which isn't really in part of what you asked, but the start of the season, they would allow the media to wait up against the back wall of the tunnel, and you can video reactions of the players and the coaches coming off the field. Well, a couple of videos surfaced, from bigger media personnel, and the Eagles put a squash to that immediately. And I think that was when that happened. I think everybody kind of knew something's going on. And talking to different beat reporters and different media members, they were all kind of perplexed. Like, why is this happening? Like, why are we all of a sudden not allowed to see the team walk off the field, whether it's after a big win or after a tough loss? And to me, I think that was maybe the tipping point of where things might have been going south a little bit, and they wanted to kind of bottle up the emotions that were being shown. I mean, obviously they could never hide it fully. I mean, we remember the video with Sirianni talking to, chirping in the tunnel, and AJ Brown kind of gave him the look like, dude, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, we barely won this game. So I don't think there was anything that I picked up or heard personally that regarded the friction or whatever. I just think it was a collective frustration from the offense.
Yeah. All season long, we mentioned on here about how the players love Sirianni because he falls on the sword for them. Basically, he takes all of the bullets. Well, you asked about Stoutland in particular in the locker room, and I think the players, particularly his offensive line players, did the same for him. They fell on the sword for him all season. Every time I asked somebody what the problem was in there, you heard the same answer over and over again. We didn't execute properly. We didn't execute properly. Everything is fine. The play calls are fine. The OL coach is fine. Kevin Patullo was fine. Everything is perfect. We're just not executing. Had we executed the plays right, everything would be fine. Nobody would be questioning Stoutland or Patullo. So I think that was very telling as far as the offensive line members go. And if you want to know about what players thought about it, there was massive frustration, like Corey mentioned. There were players who went to coaches who wanted changes to happen. Whether all that comes to the surface, who knows? I mean, you mentioned Devontae Smith talking about it. You obviously know AJ Brown was completely frustrated. There were times during the season when Lane would mention things about the offense just not working and sucking and everything else, you know. So I think you heard tidbits of it, but behind the scenes there was absolutely frustration. There are players who didn't buy into the way, you know, the Stoutland run game was working. They would have never tried to do a change in season if that weren't the case. If that wasn't happening, that would have never happened. And you can only blame the players' injuries and backups for so long. Nobody wants to hear it. And I would say when your quarterback at one point said the offense might not be what you want, but it's going to be how I want, I'd put a lot of stock into that. I would listen to what he said there, because as soon as, like I mentioned earlier, as soon as he didn't run anymore, for whatever reason you want to blame it on, I have no idea what that is, whether it was him, whether it was the coaching staff. From that moment on, the running game failed because he was a cheat code in that aspect. Every running back who's been on the Eagles the past 4 years has benefited from from Jalen Hurts, you know, and those RPOs, tucking the ball back in and running when the edge crashes out. You know, all of that has worked for them. So yes, there were players frustrated. There were people who wanted changes. And when you're dealing with, you know, top players like that, it's much easier to get rid of one coach than it is your team.
Fair game. So another week down, another offensive minded coach down. The Eagles continue to build out their staff. We'll be back next week to kind of go over other rumors, because tonight AJ Brown and Derrick Henry will be going head to head on a fashion show on Twitch for Super Bowl weeks, and I'm pretty sure something's gonna come to fruition with Derrick Henry trying to pitch Baltimore to him.
I saw recently they asked him about AJ coming to Baltimore, and Henry basically said he won't get the ball here though because they want to run. But that might change, obviously.
Apparently, he
was
he was giving Cooper DeJean a hard time on the K Adams show, saying, "Yeah, we would definitely welcome." And then Cooper's like, "Yeah, I bet you would," but Cooper's like, "I think AJ's all right in Philly."
I'm hearing Denver Broncos really want AJ Brown.
Oh, that would be
if they trade him, it's going to be an AFC team. There's no way they're trading him in conference.
Trade him to NFC. Hell no.
If he does get traded, I would look at the Denver Broncos as the trading partner.
That would be a hell of a move, and that would I'll probably ball up and cry for a little bit, probably a little bit more than a week. I hate the fact that we get great wide receivers and they just something always goes to shit. But nonetheless, at least he's not doing sit-ups in the driveway. It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. So we'll definitely, keep our eyes peeled, keep our ears to the ground, and definitely keep you guys in the loop with everything that's going on. We do appreciate you guys for joining us today. We'll see you guys live next week. Again, I'm Brian Cameron alongside Corey Naito, David Neese, and we're flipping the birds.
Flip